So this video has been a long time coming. I've been wanting to share my story about having 8 autoimmune diseases throughout my life, and I'm going to get through all of them, and this is the start of a series that I'm going to be doing because I just started my health journey where I'm going to really try to heal all these autoimmune diseases. But I wanted to catch you guys up with everything that's happened. I'm 31 years old now, and I got my first disease when I was 7. Since then, I've had 8 diseases. So I'm going to start all the way back from the beginning and tell you guys my whole story up until today. And I just think it's really valuable because I know when I've heard other people's stories, it helped me a lot. And everyone's body does things differently. So what works for me might not work for you, but it might work for somebody else. So for me, hearing other people's stories, number one, made me feel a lot less alone, but it gave me a lot of things that I could try, and it helped me find things that actually did work for me. So I do want to share that part. So this video might be a little bit long, as mentioned, because it's a lot of years of diseases to go over, and I'm going to try to fit all of it in as quickly as I can, but I want to give as much detail as I can because I think that's also really important. So I'm going to start off and just list out the diseases that I have. And if you have one of them, I will put down below the time marker so you can fast forward to that part if you want to get there. But I do think it's important to hear the whole story because they are all very interconnected. So hopefully you guys stick around for the whole story, but I'm just going to jump right on into it. So I'm going to tell you guys all of the diseases that I've had in my lifetime. So the very first disease I got was called Dermatomyositis, and that also came with the secondary disease of Rheumatoid Arthritis, and I'll explain what those are in a bit. And then the next thing I got was Hashimoto's Thyroiditis, it's called. It's a thyroid disease, but it's autoimmune. I had Vitiligo, Alopecia, and then the next few that I got were chronic hives or chronic urticaria, angioedema, and another one that I can't remember, but I'll put in the description. It's basically where your skin will just like raise up. So almost like if you scratched my skin, where you scratched it would raise up. And it's kind of all tied together with the chronic hives. So those are all of the diseases that I have, and I'm going to start at the very beginning. So the very first disease I was officially diagnosed with is called dermatomyositis, and I had symptoms of this disease for quite a while. It actually went undiagnosed. So around the time when I was 7, marker would be right after my parents got divorced, almost on the dot, I started seeing symptoms. And the very first things we noticed was on my hands. My knuckles were really red, and I almost had an eczema-like rash, which is actually what my initial diagnosis was. So I was using all these creams, and it just wasn't really getting better. And then the next thing we noticed was my mom was actually painting my nails, and she said, flatten your hand so I can paint them properly. And I was like, I can't. I couldn't flatten my hand because my joints were so sore, which is the RA. And so what the disease dermatomyositis is, derma means skin, myo I think is muscle. You guys, I'm butchering this, but basically it's a disease where it shows on the outside on your skin, but it is a joint disease and a muscular degenerative disease. So what really happens is it breaks down your muscles, and it's actually very life-threatening because your heart is a muscle, so it stops your heart. And I lost basically all strength in my body to the point I couldn't button my pants. I couldn't, pick myself up off the ground. I couldn't move around very well. It was very bad, and I'm glad that I was a kid because I really didn't understand what was going on. Yes, it was like a little bit annoying. I had to have help with things, and I remember one Christmas I couldn't open my Christmas presents because I couldn't sit on the ground and open my Christmas presents, so I had to sit in a chair. Just little things like that, and I'm sure that if I had this disease now, it would obviously affect me a lot more. And my parents were amazing and made me feel as normal as I could. So what ended up happening was I kept getting worse and worse. My parents were like, why can't you move? This is so weird. So finally, my pediatrician sent me to a rheumatologist, Dr. Scher, who was an amazing doctor. I know my dad sent her flowers every year, like years after this disease was gone and I was in remission. They ran a bunch of tests and ended up diagnosing me at that point with dermatomyositis. And so right away we started on, heavy steroids. So I started out on, actually I think we started on Aleve. And I remember I would chew it because I could not swallow pills. And I had to get blood work done every week. And then they started putting me on a bigger drug. So started with prednisone. I was taking prednisone every day for years and not really seeing any results, I don't think. So they started me then on a drug called methotrexate. This is, again, a really powerful and bad drug for you, but, you know, in cases like this where you have something that's so, you know, such a bad disease, you kind of have to go that route. And so my parents had to give me shots of this. I did take a pill version at one point, and I believe that's the drug that really started to work for me. They started to see my labs looking better. And it's actually really funny how they tested my lab work. So, you know how people take creatine because it helps break down your muscle? When you break down your muscle, you rebuild it bigger. So bodybuilders take it. Well, when your body is attacking your muscles and breaking it down, not to build muscle, but because it's degenerative, or I might not be saying this right, you guys. Like I said, I am no doctor. I would actually have really high creatine levels in my blood work. So how they tracked if my body was attacking my muscles more or less was the creatine levels. And also a funny story with that, I remember in 8th grade, I had blood work coming up and my teachers wanted me to run the mile. And my parents had, you know, told my school on days that I had to go get blood work, I wasn't allowed to do any exercise because it would throw off my lab results because my creatine levels would be higher. And I remember my one PE teacher was like, no, you have to run the mile. And so I'm not one to fight. So I was like, all right, fine. And I remember telling my dad, and he got so freaking mad. And I remember thinking, like, why is he so mad? Like, it's not that big of a deal. But little did I know, like, how scary this was for my parents. I mean, this is a life-threatening disease, and it was really bad. I just had no idea. So that's kind of a crazy side story. But anyways, I'm going to look at my notes real fast. Okay, I'm going to keep looking at notes because I don't remember this whole story. I mean, this is obviously when I was 7, and there's so much to it. So one thing I will say, when I started prednisone, it was between 4th and 5th grade summer. And when you're on that much steroids, it gives you this huge moon face. So I literally would not let my parents take pictures during this period of time. But I remember going back to school and I was like chubby looking. Like, kids kind of made fun of me, but I'm pretty sure my parents had someone come into my class and actually tell all the kids in my class like what was going on. And I know they did that with another boy that was in my school that had leukemia. So they just try to make it easier on the kid by explaining it to the rest of the class so you don't get made fun of, or so people understand why you're different, I guess. So that was one thing I forgot in my story. And then, oh, I also was lucky enough to be able to go to arthritis camp. So there was a special camp. I think I went like 5th grade summer and 6th grade summer, where kids got to go to camp for arthritis camp. It was paid for by like the Arthritis Foundation. And it was really cool because you get to meet other kids that have these same problems that you have, because otherwise, I mean, I didn't know anyone that had a disease like I had. So it's cool to see people. And actually going there, I felt like I wasn't in that bad of a case, because by the time I actually went, I was seeing a lot of progression, and there was kids that were like way worse off than me. I remember my very last time I went to arthritis camp, every day at lunch, and we were part of the camp. There was also like just regular summer camp there. And so our part always had, you know, got to take your meds at every meal. And I remember it was really nice this last time I went to camp because I only had to take meds one night out of the whole camp, whereas like everyone else had to take medicine breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And, you know, it was just like a reality check, like it could be a lot worse. But that was really fun. I think it's really cool that they do that. I think it's so important to be able to talk with other people that are going through similar experiences that you have. So basically around 7th grade, I really started to look like I was going into remission, which is great. The nice thing about having one of these autoimmune diseases when you're a kid is that if you can get it into remission in its childhood form, you don't carry it into your adult life. I'm not really sure how to explain that or how it works, but I just know if you can get a disease like this in remission as a child, you will not have it as an adult, and the adult versions can be a lot worse. So I'm lucky in that regard. The medications that I was on are so freaking bad for you, but it saved my life, and so for that I'm thankful. And so yeah, so about end of middle school, going into high school is when I was technically like officially in remission. And I remember thinking like, yes, I beat this. I'm good to go. I'm going to be healthy now. And I didn't have my next disease diagnosis until I was 18. But I'm going to take you guys back around age like 14, I would say, I was so freaking tired, like so lethargic to the point I had such a hard time waking up. I would sleep every last second I could and give myself the like least amount of time I needed to get ready to go to school. And then I'd go to school, I'd come home, take a nap, like go to bed. My parents would wake me up to eat dinner. I would do like whatever homework I needed to do and then go to bed early and repeat the cycle every day. And I remember thinking like, this is not normal. Like I should not be this tired. We went to the doctors. They're like, oh, you're just growing pains. Like this is just normal. Kids are tired when they're growing. So it's like, all right, whatever. You're the expert. And so at that, I just dealt with that for the rest of high school. And then God, this story is crazy. So the next 3 diseases I got all basically within the same time. They're all diagnosed within the same time. So what ended up happening was the first disease that showed up was called vitiligo. And you guys, this is a crazy story. I was watching this show called Embarrassing Diseases, and they feature all these different diseases that are, quote unquote embarrassing. And for those of you that don't know, vitiligo is a disease where you lose your skin pigment. So Michael Jackson had this. That's why he bleached his skin. You've probably seen people with this where they just have white splotchy skin where they lose their pigment. Well, on this show, there was a Black man that had vitiligo. And so obviously on him, because of, his skin color, it was a lot more visible. When I have white spots on my white skin, you can't see it as much because it's not that big of a contrast. And I just remember watching this and being like, oh my gosh, that's so sad. Like I can't imagine. Literally 3 days later, I had this white splotchiness on my chest. You guys can kind of see it. I spray tan to cover it. And I remember thinking like, oh, it can't be that. It must be, if you guys have ever spray tanned, you've probably heard of this candida you can get on your skin that blocks the sunlight from being able to pigment you. And then you just have to like use this cream and it goes away and then you're fine. And I remember going to the doctor and they're like, it's vitiligo. There's really nothing we can do. Like you just get it and you've lost that pigment basically for life and it could spread and get worse. And I'm like, I'm not willing to accept that answer. Let me try this ointment just to see if that's what I have. So I put this ointment all over my white spots thinking like, okay, it's going to go away. Like it has to be that. Sure enough, the ointments did not work. And so I was left to kind of accept this disease called vitiligo. And I remember just researching and trying to figure it out. 3 months after I lost my skin pigment, I was doing something I remember, and my boyfriend at the time looked at my head and he was like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, what? What's on me? Like I thought it was like a bug or something. And he was like, you have a bald spot the size of like a quarter on your head. And I was like, what? And then I looked and I saw it. And then once I saw that, I started to see that like I was losing so much more hair in the shower than was normal. And then all of a sudden I had all these bald spots on my head and I'm like, what the heck? So I go back to the doctor and they're like, oh, you have alopecia, which is hair loss. And I'm like, okay, am I going to go bald? Like, what's going to happen? Mind you, I'm 18 years old. I just started college. You're like going off into the world as an adult on your own, meeting all these new people. You're in a whole new environment. And I'm dealing with my skin and my skin turning crazy colors and my hair falling out. And, I've always felt confident in the way I looked. I've been through stuff before, obviously, with my previous diseases, but I was happy with the way I looked. I was confident in my skin. And then literally I was losing all of my confidence I had, my identity, my hair, my skin color. I'm from California. We tan. I was in the tanning beds all the time. I couldn't go anymore. And at this point, I didn't know about spray tan. So I was just pale as could be because I didn't want my spots to show because it was embarrassing to me. And so anyways, my hair's falling out. I remember at the time looking up locks of love, thinking like, I'm going to have to get a wig. I'm going to go bald. And I remember reading that like, I think at age 18, like you don't qualify. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to buy wigs. Like whatever it is, I'm gonna have to do it. I remember having to wear my hair certain ways to cover the bald spots and it was crazy. So obviously I was desperate. I was doing all kinds of research that I could trying to figure out why is this happening because the doctors basically told me like, you have it, there's nothing we can do. And so in my research, I kept seeing thyroid stuff popping up and my mom had thyroid cancer. So I was like, maybe there's something to it. I know, I don't think I have cancer, but let's just test my thyroid. So I went to the doctor, the dermatologist again, and he's like, no, it's not your thyroid. Like, we don't need to check it. And I was like, please, can you just check it? I just want to be able to rule it out at least. So he finally agreed to check it. And when they got the blood work back, he was shocked. He had never seen such bad thyroid levels, he said, than like anyone. So basically, like a normal thyroid level is like point something to like a number 3. Mine was an 18. So if the highest normal number is 3 and mine was 18, I'm not even going to try to do the math, but that's what I think 6 times as high as the highest level you should have. And so they started me on thyroid replacement medication. And as soon as that kicked in, I didn't get any more white spots, which was nice because I kept getting new ones all the time. And I'm like, it's hard enough to have them, but when you wake up and then all of a sudden you're missing pigment somewhere else, and it's like, where's it going to be next? So that was a blessing. I stopped getting more white spots. And then, they told me that your hair cycle is about 3 months. So it was going to take about 3 months of my thyroid being normal for my hair to stop falling out. So the hair loss cycle is about 3 months. And so one thing we did is I got cortisone shots in my head. And if you guys know me, which reversing back to my first disease, I had to get blood work every single week for years. And I was so scared. I would sit in my parents' lap every time. I would make them count down and then be like, wait, I'm not ready. And I just hate needles. And so they had to do shots in my head. And in like this size of a bald spot, like a quarter, they would do like 100 shots in that one area. And I remember I was just like sweating and so nervous and so scared and hating this experience. And I will never forget this doctor that's my dermatologist. He just had no compassion or empathy because he was an older guy, and he basically was like, it could be a lot worse. Like, you need to just deal with it. And I remember him like kind of laughing at how nervous I was getting shots in my head. And God, that was just such a bad experience. But anyways, I think that did help my hair regenerate faster. And so then I'm like, okay, great. We figured out the problem of the vitiligo and my hair falling out. And so I went and got more testing done for my thyroid with an endocrinologist. That's their specialty. And at that point, they told me, well, you actually have Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease thyroid problem. So it's when your own immune system's attacking your thyroid, and that's why it's not working. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm probably explaining this in like the most layman terms way. But what's crazy is my mom had her thyroid completely removed because of her cancer. And so she had to take thyroid replacement medication because she wasn't making that thyroid hormone. And I was taking a higher prescription than she was, and I still had my full thyroid. And the thing with like having low thyroid or underactive or overactive thyroid, that's one thing. But when you have the autoimmune component, there's like all these other symptoms. So like extreme fatigue, which is something I've dealt with my entire life, and all these other things. So yeah, got diagnosed with Hashimoto's. If you guys have it, you understand. There's all kinds of just problems with that. So the kind of sucky thing with having it be autoimmune is that it fluctuates a lot. And when your thyroid is off, you feel horrible. So going back to what I was telling you guys about in high school when I was really tired, my thyroid was probably off all the way back starting when I was 14, but not diagnosed till I was almost 19. So 5 years of my thyroid being off that much. I truly think if they would have figured it out sooner, I would have never gotten the vitiligo and never had my hair fall out. And luckily, like I said, I don't really get new spots very often. I still do. I still have both diseases. I do have hair loss. I remember, when I was 21, I was going out a lot and just being irresponsible taking my thyroid medicine. So my levels were off and I lost a lot of hair again at that point, and kind of off and on in patches throughout my life I have. So, I kind of dealt with it. I accepted that, okay, now I have these 3 diseases and that's just what it is. But I was lucky and thankful that I now at least had a diagnosis. We figured out that my thyroid was really the culprit of all this. And if as long as I kept that under control, everything was good. So again, I'm like, all right, we figured this out. I'm back on my way to being healthy. And then I think I figured out that it was actually when I was about 26. I'll never forget, I woke up one day covered in this like rash or whatever. I didn't know what it was. Come to find out, it was hives. And I remember I called the doctor. They had me send in like a video of what I look like just to see, because I forget why I couldn't go into the doctor's office. I don't know, but I sent in a video and they're like, oh, it looks like hives. Take some over-the-counter antihistamines and you should be fine. And so I did, and I was fine. And I just thought, okay, maybe I like was allergic to something, whatever. Like, people get hives. I had never had hives in my life, but I was like, people get it for allergies. So random, okay, cool. But then I kept getting it. Fast forward to now, I realized and gotten diagnosed that it's chronic hives. So I don't actually have an allergy to anything. My body just somehow produces all these histamines and I have a reaction of hives. Now, I don't know about you guys. I had never had hives up to this, and I actually remember having a friend that got hives once and she canceled plans, and I was like, it's not that big of a deal, come on. If you've ever had hives, especially chronic hives where you have them for weeks at a time where they won't go away, I mean, people commit suicide over this disease because it is just so painful and annoying and you can't sleep. It's this vicious cycle. And I mean, there's been points in time where I literally feel like my skin is on fire. And so with that disease, I also got the other one called angioedema, which is where you have swelling, random swelling. So sometimes you'll just have like fat lips. And of course, they're never even or cute. It doesn't look like I got lip injections. It'll be like this whole side, just like fat up here. Just last week, I woke up and my whole cheeks were like so swollen. It looked like I had like wisdom teeth surgery, like so bad. My lips, I've had my eyes swell shut. I've had, hard lumps on my forehead, which it'll literally look like I hit my head on something and have like this huge hard lump, but I didn't actually hit my head on anything. Had it where it swells up my entire hands and feet. I might actually pop in some videos of like some of the worst times that I've ever had hives, but I also might just do a whole nother video all about hives because that's the disease that I've had most recently. So I feel like I have a lot more details I can share with you guys about that. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at now. I mean, I've been dealing with these problems my whole life, and I just now hired a functional medicine doctor, so kind of like a naturopath, and we're going down the road of getting a bunch of tests done. We are going over my entire history, which I actually did today, so that I'm going to follow up once I get my full report back and do a whole video on what we found from my history. And it is fascinating how like certain events line up with things showing up. And then I'm going to be doing this whole protocol, cutting things out of my diet, going over my test results with you guys. And, this is something I've known I needed to do and I've wanted to do. But what's interesting is this is not the norm. People say go to the traditional doctor and they'll fix you. That's what our healthcare is. But the thing is like I've never been actually healed or fixed the actual problem. They give me these drugs that put a Band-Aid on it. They get rid of my symptoms so I feel better in the moment when I'm having a flare-up, like with hives, but then I get them again and I'm not fixing the problem. And then the medications I'm taking, again, I'm taking, crazy steroids, prednisone all the time. This really messes up your gut. It's so bad for your body. It's so bad for your joints. And, doctors hardly ever prescribe it, but I've been prescribed it so much in my life, and they hate prescribing it because it's so dangerous and bad for you, but there's no other option. And so up until this point, I've been, going the traditional medicine route where they just give me medications that fix the symptoms, make me feel better for a little bit, but I keep having these problems. And what's scary to me is, like I kind of shared with you guys, I conquer one disease, think I'm good, and then a few years later I get some more. And so my whole life, my biggest fear is like, what one am I going to get next? Is it going to be life-threatening? Is it going to, there's ones that make you go blind. There's all kinds of autoimmune diseases. And so I've always known I needed to go this natural route, but it is a big undertaking. I have to change my whole lifestyle, my whole diet, do all these crazy things. But it's crazy because we have been taught a different way. And this is stuff that we should all be doing. So I'm going to share with you guys my entire journey. I'm going to document it a lot better than I just tried to explain my whole last, 23 years of my life, 24 years of my life of having these diseases. But kind of just wanted to fill you guys in on what diseases I have, what they're like, what they do. And then I'm going to go in a lot more detail in the next few videos because I'm going to really document each and everything as it's happening. So tomorrow I get my full report back from my functional medicine doctor, and I'm going to go over it with you guys and show you exactly what's happened in my life and what triggers have lined up, because I think it's really interesting. And I've known, for example, my parents' divorce was right when I first got my first disease. And I know like emotional and stressful events can trigger things to really kick into action, but that's not what caused the disease. That's just what triggered it to really flare up. And what I do think it was, and what we found today, for example, when I was a baby, I had really bad ear infections and they put me on antibiotics, and antibiotics destroy your gut, and your immune system lives in your gut. So it's wreaking havoc. And my whole life I've had all these drugs I've been taking, all kinds of, antibiotics I've taken in my lifetime. So my gut is just a freaking mess. And that is probably what's been causing all of these problems. So as we can start to repair my gut, we're going to start repairing my health back to where I should be. And my body will work as it's supposed to, because your body is, I mean, you think about how crazy it is that our bodies work the way they do. They're built to work and heal themselves. And so that's what we're getting back to. So I'm really excited to share that with you guys. I feel like I rambled on here, but there's so much I probably left out too. But that's the gist of my story. That's where we're at today. And I'm just really excited. My sister also has a bunch of autoimmune diseases. She has different ones than me, but also some of the same. And she's going through the same program as I am with the same doctor. So I'm definitely going to have her on to compare, because we're getting like genetic testing done. We've had a lot of the same life experiences, been exposed to a lot of the same things, but also have things that are different. We obviously have some genes that are different life experiences. We've lived in different places. So I'm really curious to see how much of our stuff overlaps, but how much is different, and how it's been expressed in us differently, and to kind of track both of our journeys to healing together. So yeah, I'm done rambling. But if you guys have any questions, put it down below. I have some other fun videos to do as well on this. I'm going to bring on my parents to talk about what it was like to have a kid that had this crazy, scary disease, because I think there's other parents that are going through this, and maybe we can have this back and forth conversation of what it's like to be a kid and have these diseases, what it's like to be a parent, what they told me, what they didn't, and how I responded, because I really don't remember it. I also want to bring on my boyfriend. He's a chiropractor, and they're very much in kind of like the functional medicine space. And I've definitely seen a lot of improvements since he's been treating me with chiropractic. But, you know, you can't fix all your problems with chiropractic. There's going to be a lot of things we got to fix. As my doctor said, it's like a boat with 20 holes, and chiropractic might fill one of those holes, but we got to fill all the holes so that the boat doesn't sink. So that's kind of where we're at. So I feel like I rambled, and I feel like I said that 20 times, but that is my story. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that was helpful to some of you guys. Like I said, leave your questions in the comment box below, and if you have any like video suggestions, totally open. Stay tuned. I'm going to be documenting the entire process for you guys, and I think those videos are going to be a lot more put together and easier to follow along with and valuable.